Okay, in this video, we are going to start talking about writing and how important it is. And so we're going to look at chapter 1. But before watching this video, you need to have thought about your definition of writing, even write it down somewhere if needed. And then if you haven't already, I want you to pause this video and watch the other 2 posted videos on our website. Let's see, it should be this one, What is Writing in the 21st Century? And then just watch the first couple of minutes of this Why is Writing Important video. And then you can go back and read the chapter, and then you can watch this screencast, which is what I'm making right now. So after you've done all of that, I want you to think about how writing how your definition of writing is in comparison to what it talked about in the video about writing in the 21st century. Did your definition of writing change? Most people would have thought about writing as just putting a pen to paper like you see in this picture up here. But writing really is different. So what stood out to you in particular in the videos? Do you think anything needs to be added or changed? And you'll talk about some of this in your small group postings for this week. So then I want you to go and explore these videos down here. And the reason I want you to watch these is because since our definition of writing really has expanded and changed over time, I want you to think more broadly about writing in general and think about it more as creating instead of just writing. And so I want you to watch these videos and look at the text that they are and really ask yourself what kind of writing this would be. This first video is my niece. She writes spoken word poetry, and this is her performance of that. And then this is about middle school students writing and making videos. And then one more down here, this is a thing link about famous landmarks in Europe. And I want you to look at those and really figure out what type of writing those involve. Okay, so writing in today's world, just like in the Why is Writing Important video, and as our author Kelly Gallagher has said, writing is needed in every single occupation, and actually it's needed more and more all the time. Every job contains some sort of communication element, and the types are expanding every single day, whether it be social media, videos, emails. Some people even still write letters, job applications, you write reports, technical reports, but you don't communicate the same with an employer as you do with a friend. And so it's important to teach the difference in those formats so we can think about the context of writing as well. And that is sometimes referred to as code switching. So you're going to talk a lot differently in a tweet than you would in an email to your boss. And so I want you to be thinking about what types of jobs require writing in some form. Our textbook is very down to earth, applicable, and it focuses on real world purposes for writing. And so we want students to understand that in the real world, they are going to use writing and they need to know why. And if you've had me in any classes before, you understand that I really value the meaningfulness of education. And so in your small group post, you will be talking about your own writing experiences in middle school and high school. And if you feel like that prepared you for college and for the job that you're going to have. Now on this link right here, this is just a website that talks about the different jobs that use persuasive writing. And so you can look at that. There are all kinds of websites and blogs out there that talk about the different types of writing that certain jobs need. Well, my husband is a mechanical engineer, and he is looking for a new engineer to work in his department. And he looks at their resumes, but he also looks at their writing samples. He looks at their ability to write technical reports and correspond and communicate with suppliers and with the people that they design gearboxes for. And so it's important, even in this technical field, in an engineering field, that students know how to write. So in the textbook, it talks about students not writing enough. And it's really interesting because I think about my own kids and when I was teaching, and we wrote a lot. But the problem is that it's really difficult for teachers to teach writing. A lot of them feel inadequate in those situations, and maybe they don't know how to teach it. Maybe they don't value writing. Maybe they don't understand its importance. What do you think are the reasons for students not writing enough? In the quote on page 4, I thought this was very interesting. Kelly Gallagher says, every year in the United States, large numbers of adolescents graduate from high school unable to write, at least at the basic levels required by colleges or employees. In addition, every school day, 7,000 young people drop out of high school, many of them because they lack the basic literacy skills to meet the growing demands of the high school curriculum. Because the definition of literacy includes both reading and writing skills, poor writing proficiency should be recognized as an intrinsic part of this national literacy crisis. And this was quoted from Graham and Perrin in 2007. And this was just really interesting because students are leaving school because they don't know how to read and write, because it becomes too hard. And that means we need to start earlier. Integrating writing into every area, not just language arts, but every area. And there's a huge push because of Common Core, which we will talk about next week, to have students write across the curriculum. So I want you to think right now about your survey results, and I want you to think about what the teachers said in how they integrate writing into their instruction. What have you observed in your field experience classrooms? What surprised you? What did you expect? And you'll be writing about this in your small group discussion this week and responding to your small group members as well. So, several of the videos that I watched to choose the ones for you to watch for this chapter talked about writing to navigate your own chaotic thoughts. It talked about writing to express your opinions, to evaluate what you think. And what is really interesting is that a lot of teachers think about writing as grammar and spelling and 5-paragraph essays and that type of thing, but it's not all about that. Writing as a big picture is more about expressing content or expressing your feelings, your reflections, your innermost thoughts, or what you know about a subject, what you can are trying to explain to your audience, what you're trying to evaluate or interpret or propose a solution to, take a stand on something. So we have to remember, though, that students need a purpose for writing. So writing well does not begin with teaching students how to write. It begins with teaching students why they should write. So think back to some of the videos that you watched, and what were some of the reasons that those people wrote those things? So when they were creating the videos, or when Allison was performing her poetry, the thing link that you watched or that you explored. Why were those students doing those things? They all had a purpose, and they need to be real world purposes. And so you'll be thinking about that. Let's go on to this one. We're going to talk about 2 central premises throughout this semester. And the first one is introducing young writers to real world discourses. So an authentic purpose makes all the difference. And if you know much about me, and most of you do, all of you do actually, you know I am about authenticity and all about meaningful learning. And so this really stood out to me. I wanted to read this little paragraph to you on page 9 from Mr. Gallagher's work. It's so funny to hear his voice come out in his writing. So he says, what kind of writing do we want our students to be doing 10, 20, or 30 years from now? Because part of the problem with the writing, and this is me talking now, is that students think it is a K-12 school activity, not a life activity, and we need to change that. So he says, imagine this scenario. You're walking down a street 20 years from now, and a former student recognizes you and rushes up to you. Excitedly, she blurts out, oh, it is so good to see you. I was hoping to run into you someday so that I can tell you that I am still writing essays that analyze the author's use of tone. I keep a tone journal at home, and I apply that skill you taught me 20 years ago in the 10th grade to everything I read today. Let's have lunch someday so I can share all the essays I have written, recognizing the author's tone found in all the books I have read since high school graduation. Okay, that's a little crazy because we hope students don't do that. Real adults don't do that. So why do we expect students to analyze purpose and all this and write essays, 5-paragraph essays here and there and everywhere? So he says, I don't know about you, but if that happened to me, I would run for safety. Instead, consider an alternative scenario. You are walking down a street 20 years from now, and a former student recognizes you and rushes up to you. Excitedly, she blurts out, oh, it is so good to see you. Did you see my letter in yesterday's Los Angeles Times challenging the governor's proposed budget? I was so incensed, I sent a copy both to the governor's office and to my state senator. By the way, have you seen my blog? That is an outcome that any teacher would be proud of. So I want us to think about what ways we can start having middle school students write that are real world, that are authentic purposes, and that they will use throughout their life. So I want you to think right now about what ways have you used writing in your life lately? What real world purposes have you used? I know for me, I've tweeted. I'm starting to write my blog again. I have written loads of emails and posts on Google Plus communities, and I've also responded and written Facebook posts and messages. I've also written grocery lists, to be honest. So we want to think back to our own activities and think how we can have those writing purposes be real for our students as well, so they can use their writing long after they've been in your class. So these are the types of writing we are going to be focusing on this semester: express and reflect, inform and explain, which you use a lot in content area writing, like in science, in math, you're explaining things. Evaluate and judge, where you make a judgment call. You might discuss the good and the bad, the pros and the cons, or you're trying to convince someone of something. Inquire and explore, if it's a real problem you need to wrestle with. Analyze and interpret. You need to write to analyze something, and then take a stand or propose a solution. So you stand up for what you believe in, and that's persuasive writing. So the second central premise that we are going to talk about is being a teacher model. And you know from last semester in our teaching reading class, we talked about thinking aloud and modeling. And it's the same thing with writing. So as the teacher model, we go first and then the students do it. So this helps them to understand that we have expectations that they need to meet, and it also gives them confidence to emulate that model that you've given them. You are going to do a writing mini lesson in this course, and you're going to have to think aloud while doing that writing mini lesson, just like you did for reading. And there's a link right here that you can go to, and it is a really great example and explanation of what they call write alouds instead of think alouds, because you're actually writing out loud in front of your students. And so you can go through and see what this strategy looks like. And it's a really helpful tool that you can use while you're doing your writing mini lesson and preparing for that. The other thing that we want students to be able to use is mentor texts. And I didn't write that here, but share your writing as mentored texts. You want to show your process, not just the cleaned up published version. So you want the kids to see the process. And then they should learn from other authors as well. And there are all kinds of examples out on the web of other authors. For example, this is an article about A-Rod, which, a lot of sports fanatics will be interested in this, or just people who like sports writing. But this author evaluates Alex Rodriguez's appeal. And so he takes a stand. So that's one type of writing. He also evaluates throughout that article as well. So you can use that, which is very interesting to a lot of kids, as an example, a mentor text. Now, this one is a Wall Street Journal that story that talks about the IRS, and it was written about a year and a half ago, maybe, when the IRS was going through a lot of the problems it was going through about Obamacare and all of that good stuff. And that one was to inform or explain, but you can also take an article about the recent Ferguson protests and also the New York City Police Department protests. And then here's another expert mentor text from Jerry Seinfeld. And I don't know if you guys are too young to have watched the Seinfeld show, but he's hilarious. And this one is a little video from him on how to write a joke. And so this is one of those, it's an ad. So, but you can go on and look at that. But it is a video that would be classified as inform and explain, which it's actually just really fun to go watch. So those are all mentor texts that you can use to help your students know how to write. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to look through these resources that I've linked here. So some newspapers, some sports papers, some science, some math things, some weekly readers, or other kid-friendly resources. And I want you to look through them and find one and try to categorize it as one of those different types of writing. And post that on your small group on the Google Plus community. And then you guys can explore one another's and think and talk about what value that would be and how to use it as a mentor text. So that's all for chapter 1.